So I'm Anton. I'm working as QA and tester more than 8 years, and I like to break backend services because most of the time I'm working with backend and testing backend. So I'm using Java and Python to automate things. And if you want to ask any question, you can ping me on Telegram or on Twitter. So today we will talk about GitLab. But before we move on, I just want to emphasize that all this stuff is happening because engineering teams are not in silos anymore. We are working together and we have like huge rise of DevOps. It it became a buzzword basically, but the idea is basically to collaborate more. DevOps is not about people who understand Linux and servers. DevOps is about collaboration between several roles in a team. You can be basically on several sites at one moment, but if you try to distinguish the team roles, it's more about development roles, quality assurance, and IT operations. And when all of the people are starting to work together to speed up the process, to build better software, to test it more frequently, it's all about DevOps. And you already saw this uh, sign about DevOps. Basically, it's a loop where you plan your releases, you create feature branch where you code, and then you merge this branch to some fresh build. You release this build, you deploy it somewhere, and you continuously monitor how it works. So the idea is to make many changes frequently and understand as soon as possible if something goes wrong. And basically, you can test this loop anywhere, and it becomes crucial to not only check the result, not only check the deployed build, but to check it early. And when we talk about early stages about this continuous integration and continuous delivery, we are basically talking about some pipeline. Here you can see like if developer made a change, made a commit in some source control system, it automatically starts the pipeline. It builds the software, runs some tests, it can then deploy it to some environment. It doesn't matter, but ideally what we want to build is some, let's say, magic that will move any change to production without interaction with people. And when you have suits, testing suite that you are rely on and you are confident that everything is good, you can push changes directly to production. Sometimes it's a case, sometimes not, but ideal situation when you make a change and you are confident enough to move it to production. And when we talk about systems that are currently available, there are many, but uh, GitLab is quite popular because you can not only use it as SaaS platform, you can use it internally, you can deploy it on your environment, and it's crucial for some companies that cannot rely on third-party systems and SaaS platforms. That's why GitLab is quite popular. And today I'm gonna show you how QA and tester can look into pipelines and what kind of feedback you can give to the team or just fix it by yourself. So that's basically it. Let's move to the testing project. So let me check out the code. It's a Node.js application that I'm gonna use, and this application is clone of medium.com website. It's like a platform of blogs. Let me check why it's not out. Before we move on, first I'd like to show some basics. So if you start learning, I suggest you to open pipeline architecture to understand like building blocks of pipelines. Pipelines are like stages where you define some steps with your code or with your application, and each stage can contain several jobs. And for example, if stage contains several jobs, all of them will run simultaneously in parallel. And you also should know that each job is running inside dedicated environment. So it means that, for example, if you start job A and job B will start afterwards, they will use different environments. They can use actually one, but there is no guarantee that job will start from the same runner. So, and it basically uh, gives you ability to scale all that stuff, but you should keep in mind that always when you want to move some data from your early stages and from your early jobs to the jobs that are going to execute later, you have to keep in mind that you need some mechanism to get this data, because initially when you start your job, it has only your source code and nothing else. And if we are talking about Node.js applications, you all know that they have quite big Node modules folder where all your dependencies are living. And it's crucial to build pipeline that will help you to move all these dependencies between jobs and speed up your pipeline, not to download each time all the dependencies, to run some linters, tests, and so on. And I will show you some open source example how the initial pipeline looks like, and we will try to improve it. That's basically how the pipeline looks like. So now let's move to the code. I just want to understand why I have not the initial state. Okay, let me reset it. So status. This is our example application. It already has this GitLab CI YAML. It's basically the config file where you describe everything about your pipeline. And I'm using the SaaS service, gitlab.com. So the problem is that each time I start the pipeline, it runs like 20 minutes because the shared runners they provide, they they are quite slow. That's why I will not be able to show you each step. And for that, I will just show you like initial state. For example, that's how initial pipeline looks like. We have stages build, linting, test, and deploy. Today we will not talk about deploying. We will focus on these three stages: building, linting, and test. You can see that build is green. If we click here, we will see that we got some npm packages and create the cache for these packages. For linting, we have some errors, but it doesn't matter because we will not focus on it. And also we have this test unit, job, and test end-to-end. Inside test end-to-end, we have a Cypress tests, and I will show how they look like on my machine first. So here is initial state. I'm going to run npm CI to get the all necessary dependencies, and later I will try to execute the end-to-end tests just to show you how the application looks like. And we will move to the GitLab config. So I started downloading the packages. It's quite slow now, maybe because I'm also showing my screen on Zoom. Let's wait a little bit. In the meantime, when it's running, I will show you something else. GitLab is trying to promote this DevOps for any team, even the team that doesn't have any dedicated person. They have so-called auto DevOps. They are trying to detect the language of your repository, and for that kind of project, they are trying to execute some steps like building, testing, and so on. And if you are new to GitLab, I suggest you to check out how the scripts for auto DevOps look like, because it's basically a great source for knowledge, because GitLab is publishing them for open source. You can find them and check out how auto DevOps look like for different languages and use it as a source of knowledge. But at the same time, you should understand that this magic will not build you something that is well organized, fast, and doing only stuff that it should do. They're trying to make it like more project agnostic and to make it general. That's why it's quite useful to start with. But if you want to build something not trivial and to use resources wisely, I think it's better just learn the syntaxes and understand how everything is described inside and build your pipeline without this magic, because it will help you to speed up the things and you will understand more how you can help with the CI/CD pipelines. So let's check. Oh, it's still downloading the packages. Oh, quite long, but I believe it should finish now. So before we are waiting, can you please uh, put a plus sign if you have any experience with GitLab or any other CI/CD tool? Please put a plus sign on the chat. And if you don't have any experience, please put a minus. Okay, looks like we have half of the juniors who have some experience and some people just new for all that stuff. If you're new, it will be maybe difficult for you to understand what I'm showing, but I encourage you to check out at least some documentation, maybe some videos on YouTube to to check out how it works for your team, because I believe that if QA understands how this CI/CD procedures are implemented, you can contribute in more productive way, and you can discuss with developers some stuff, and you will build your um, I would say experience, and people will trust you if you understand how to help them do their job. Because honestly, developers are not much interested in all the stuff in CI/CD. Everybody wants to do their job, and all that kind of stuff is quite uh, related to the job, but they treat it like a headache. So if you will be able to understand and to help developers with it, you will be in a good shape, and I believe market will pay you more, because we have a shortage of people who can help move teams in this bright future of CI/CD. So finally, we have all the dependencies. Let's try to execute end-to-end tests. They are written in Cypress, but again, it doesn't matter. I will just show how the app look like and how the tests look like. And our goal is to run them on our CI/CD pipeline. Looks like Node.js is trying to consume all my memory. When I tried before, it was much faster. Oh, okay. When we're waiting, I will just show what we have. We have image called node latest. This image will be used for our jobs when we run them as Docker runner, because in GitLab you have basically two types of runners. One type is Docker, and this type of runner is preferable because Docker provides you isolation, good isolation, and you are able to run everything you need in Docker. And we have also shell runners, and I would say that they are useful only if you need to build Docker image. In all other cases, just use Docker executors. So now you can see that's how our application looks like. Some tests are running, some of them will pass, some of them will fail, but it just to make you understand what we are doing with this project. So it will create screenshots for failed test cases and also some video. In our pipeline, we want to include these screenshots and artifacts too, to be able to understand where the tests failed. So when it's finished, I will start changing the pipeline. So again, we have runners that are Docker and runners that are shell. In our current session, I will use only Docker runners. And this instruction about image says that all our jobs will run with Node.js Docker image. And the first thing that I don't like here is that the tag for this image is latest. The problem is that during a time we will have new releases like Node.js 15, 16, 17, and so on. And each time new release come out, this latest tag will point to the latest release. It means that after some time, we will have not consistent runs. And ideally, we should have pipeline that will run the same way even after 5 years. So the first step, you should think about how to make your pipeline consistent, and it should not have any dependency on things that can change during the time. That's why let's start with changing the Docker tag for our base image. I will put 14 because currently the latest LTS release for Node is 14. Let's move later. We have 4 stages. Deploy we will not discuss today, so I will just remove this deploy prod step completely. So let's focus on these 3 stages: build, linting, and test. We have also environment variables here. The first one, npm config cache, is about path to the folder where we put all our dependencies. And second one about Cypress cache, because Cypress downloads the browser with some stuff and it will put everything inside this cache Cypress folder. Okay, here we have cache keyword, and this keyword describes how we're gonna use cache for our pipeline. First step, we are using key with some environment called CI commit ref slug. It's basically the name of our feature branch. I personally prefer to use not the branches for cache, but the files with our dependencies. In our case, all the dependencies live in package log.json. So the first step, let's change this cache for the key for the cache to the file package log.json. What it helps us to use even different feature branches with the same cache. In case you create new cache, in case you create new branch, first time you will have to download all the dependencies and put them in cache, and only the second run will use that cache. That's not so good. So let me change it a little bit. So I'm changing that stuff. To describe it, I'm using also the key, but our key is the file. Here we have list of folders that we want to cache. The problem here that we also see node modules folder, and as we can see previously, all npm dependencies will go to .npm folder, and if we use command npm ci, each time this command will delete the node modules folder and create it from scratch using .npm cache. So we have inconsistent behavior here. We can basically remove node modules without changing any stuff. Can you see my screen? Because I saw a warning that I'm not sharing. Can you put a sign? Okay, great. So we removed node modules. Everything is good. Let's move further. We have our build stage. Inside this build stage, we will use npm to download the dependencies and to build the artifact with our application. Great. And here we have artifacts described. Artifacts is basically the results of your job that can be used later. You can specify the time to save them, like for 30 days or for 1 hour, doesn't matter. By default, each artifact will be available on GitLab for 30 days. Here we have folder dist. It means that inside dist folder, we have our build application. But again, I saw the problem here because we are creating artifact only for dist, but our later steps, they will need like npm run test and this npx linter. They will need our dependencies too. Linting part can be executed without dependencies, but testing part definitely needs the dependencies. So we have here dependencies described from the build job, but the problem, we don't have the result. The result of this stage should be folder with dependencies. That's why we need to put node.js node modules folder here. So let's change this, and we also need to put node modules and cache for the Cypress, because inside our end-to-end tests we will use the Cypress tool. So it means that we need to add node modules and Cypress. Let's do that. Like that. Okay, cool. Why we can't use cache for the node models? Because each uh, job that will run after the build stage, it can have no cache at all. It means that your job will start from scratch. And we want to move all our dependencies to the consequent jobs to be able to run our commands. That's why we need to put node models like that. I saw many projects that are using that kind of moving dependencies between jobs not efficiently. That's why I decided to show it on example for Node.js. So we changed here. Let's move further. What we can improve. I remember one thing that I forgot to mention. If we describe cache like that, it means that it will be available for all jobs, and all job will try to pull the cache. If there is no cache, it will put after the job execution all the folders in the cache. Why it's not so good? Because let's say you have 3 or 5 jobs, and each job will try to download cache, create new version, download cache, create new version. It basically not so useful because you install the packages only inside your first job, and you need this cache only inside your first job. That's why it's better to use that kind of cache only once. To do so, we can describe the cache a little bit different. We can use like job to describe the cache and then extend our jobs with that cache. It means we will use this cache only inside one job, not for everyone, because it will not be common. So how to do that? I will put a little bit different sources. Here I'm defining the job dependencies cache, and inside this job I'm only describing my cache. And inside build, I need to tell the GitLab to get all that behavior. By the way, I forgot again to put cache Cypress, and I will describe this policy. Policy means how the cache will be used. If we have only pull, it means that job will try to pull the cache, but will not push it. We can put pull, push, or pull, push together. I prefer to use as default behavior only pulling, and if I need to update the cache, I will explicitly put it inside dedicated job. So how we should edit? We need to use keyword extends. We are telling that we want to extend current job with this dependency that we described here, and we want to override the policy. We want to change it to be able to pull and push. It means that we will build our cache only once. It's the most efficient way. Okay, what else? what we can change. I think we did a lot of changes. Let's try to run it. Okay, first run. What we changed? We changed not to use tag. We removed the deploy job. We use dedicated cache. Remove node modules from the cache, and specify artifacts for the build job. Okay, great. Sorry, I forgot to change the branch. Let's create new branch. Meetup. Okay, we changed the branch, and now we can commit. Commit and push the changes. Okay, great. So we should be able to see the new run here on GitLab. Cool. We have failed run. So let's use CI lint tool to understand where is the problem. I will copy all my config and put it here to validate. Okay, I see the problem. I need to change this cache. That's the problem with YAML config. Yeah, it's really headache because you don't understand where is the problem before you run it. So I fix it. Fix the GitLab config. Let's try again. Let's check how our pipeline. Okay, great. So pipeline is started. Now we have only 3 stages: build, linting, and test. And let's check the build stage. As you can see, we are using Docker executor, and the image is used Node 14, as we described. All that's kind on GitLab.com is slow. That's why let's move further, and I will switch to this step later. What we can basically change. One of the problems I saw that here we have stages. After build, we will execute linting. After linting, we will execute test. But in reality, these test jobs can be perfectly run just after the build. And we want to run them after build is executed. To do so, GitLab has some kind of keyword that you need to use. This keyword called needs. Currently, we don't see on this tab anything because I'm not using this keyword. How it works? Basically, you describe your dependency inside job, and if this dependent job already executed, your current job where you describe the needs, it will start automatically. It helps to speed up pipeline drastically because you you don't need to put even on the previous stage your job. You can just change dependencies to needs and it will automatically do all the stuff. Let's do that. Here we have dependencies described. This keyword tells GitLab that current linting job will need to download artifacts from the build job. What we're going to do, we want to change these dependencies to needs. Okay. And we also, here we changed. We also want to change them for tests. Here and here. Cool. Now, after the committing these changes, we will see that our test jobs will run straight after the build process finished. Run test jobs after build finished. Okay, great. Committing the changes. Cool. Let's check out how our pipeline is working. Oh, it's slow as hell. It's still building. So you can see that as I previously played with all that stuff, it checked the cache for the file. It basically checked the hash function of the file, and this hash function result is this number. We have already cache for that. That's why I'm using existing cache. Later, I'm executing npm-ci command. Why you need to use npm-ci in your pipeline, not npm install? Because npm install each time will try to check inside registry new versions of your dependencies, and it will overwrite your package log.json, and that's not good solution because again our idea to build pipeline that doesn't rely on any changes during the time. That's why you should always use in pipelines command npm-ci, and it will help you download the same versions of your dependencies, and each build will be practically the same. Here we have npm run build production. I'm not experienced with Angular, but this is some tools for Angular projects. Angular is building some stuff, putting it in dist folder. Then at the end of our job, we are updating the cache, and you can see that cache is created for two folders, for .npm and for cache Cypress. And these two folders are quite big. That's why this saving the cache and uploading it, it will take time. Sometimes maybe cache will not give you some boost in the speed you should compare building the project without the cache and then try to build it with the cache. Because here we are using the shared runners on gitlab.com. Maybe it's not so useful, but if you use it in your GitLab that is installed in your company, I would say that cache will give you some boost. So now we will see that both our pipelines are running, but we have to wait till they will execute next step. My latest changes are not visible because still build is not finished. So what we can change else? I know that linting part will fail. That's why I will put one magic word to be able to overcome it. In GitLab you have a allow failure option. We need to make it allow failure true, but not for unit tests, for linting. Okay. And also, when you execute this test, you want to collect artifacts not only on your successful run, but for the failure too. That's why you need to tell that you need to collect artifacts all the time. And here the passes are not right. I will change them. It should be like that. And for the image, as you can see, it uses Node.js 10. We want to use 14. We should change it also. Okay. What else? That's basically it. We improved the pipeline. Let's make the changes. So we will collect artifacts from Cypress on failure 2, and also update Cypress image, and also change and allow linter to fail. Let's commit the changes. Unfortunately, the pipeline is so slow that I will not be able to show the result. Because we still need to wait previous pipelines. See, it's still trying to upload artifacts. Very slow. So speaking about the pipeline, I showed all that I wanted. I just want again to emphasize that if you start digging into this world of CI/CD, you should carefully check the current situation and just make like not the prediction but some assumption and then verify this assumption. If cache provides you boosting the speed, okay, you should apply it. If not, you can just remove it. So you basically testing all your assumptions and then commit them to the pipeline. And there is like some steps that I'm following when I'm trying to improve the job performance on GitLab. It doesn't matter GitLab or not. You should check the time of execution for each job. For example, let's say that this test end to end took 10 minutes. You can try to find the job that will run the same time and put it in parallel if they are not rely on each other. In our case, I'm showing only linting and testing part. That's why we can just blindly put it in parallel because they are not interference with each other. But you may have job for building the Docker. You may have the job to run some static code analysis and so on. That's why it's better to think about it. Also, don't use the cache that is shared between all jobs. I suggest you to use cache only for your first stage where you download in the dependencies and build the cache on the same job. And also, if you specify the key for the cache, I suggest to use files instead of some environment variables or feature branches, because if you use file with dependencies, you will have cache for most of the cases automatically. And the last part, if you see that some jobs can be executed sooner, just specify the needs keyword as we did, and it will speed up your pipeline also. So basically that's it. Let's check what we have here. It's still running. So I will check the chat and allow everybody to ask the questions. Just a second. Okay, now you can unmute and ask the questions if you have, or put them on the chat. I will try to answer. Do you have suggestions of tools and languages that traditional manual tester can learn? My testers are not technical and started learning to use SOAP UI for a specific project. However, not all of them are exposed to tools and testing in different ways. I'm keen to support and help them. Toyer, maybe you can suggest something for the newcomers for the automation role.
Anton, what was the question again?
The question is if we have testers that are not technical and we want them to start some learning and playing with automation, what kind of tools and languages you will suggest to start with?
Okay, so I think there is so definitely test automation university is the one place to go, and YouTube videos. There's quite a lot of content on there. I would suggest, I don't know if anyone have seen the book Java for Testers. That's a nice starting point to actually look into. Java for testers, it's quite comprehensive. It targets mostly around learning Java specifically for the testers. So that's one thing I would suggest. I would suggest. I really would say if you look at the languages that's more easier for testers to QAs to grasp, it's probably be Java and JavaScript. So those are the ones I would suggest. So look at those resources: YouTube, Java for Testers, the book, and Test Automation University. Definitely a good place to start off.
Okay, great. I agree with you that Test Automation University has many courses dedicated to some tools. So if you are not aware about something, you can just play with it and understand, do you really need it or not?
Correct.
It's quite useful because you can touch it practically and solve some problems. And I would say that uh, from my perspective, it's better not to dig only in one language, but to try learn one language uh, with I forgot, like static typing, and one with dynamic, like for example Java plus Python, or Java plus JavaScript, or Kotlin plus Python, anything, because it will help you also to uh, learn quicker and to understand things better, how everything is working and all that stuff. Thank you for your question, Janine. So if anybody has a question regarding GitLab and Magic that I showed, I will happy to answer. Meanwhile, you can see that my first run was successful for build stage, and LinkedIn failed. And you can see that we have exit code 1. It means not 0. It means that's an error. And all the consequent jobs even not executed. That's how the pipeline looks like. Fail fast is a good scenario. Our second job will fail the same way, but the last one should move further.
Sir, I
Yes?
have a question. It's with regarding the GitLab, right? Okay, because it's been some time that I've been using GitHub. Okay, so how far this GitLab is uh, a different kind of approach towards continuous integration and delivery when you compare to the GitHub, sorry. And what are the additional features you have here? Because this is my first time for the GitLab for any presentation or
Mm-hmm.
listening out actually. So can you just help me understand what is a major difference and why we should shift ourselves, or whether we should shift from GitHub or to GitLab? Why we should shift?
I got your question. Thank you. I would say that you should use what your current team is using. For the current state of CI/CD market, I believe that GitLab and GitHub are the kings. So it doesn't matter which one you are using, because sometimes it's better to use GitHub because everything is like uh, on SaaS based, and it's easy for many teams. There are a lot of third party integrations for the GitHub. They have quite interesting approach for reusing the jobs and reusing the steps. Actually, we had a uh, talk from the previous meetup where my friend showed how you can use GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is quite modern and quite new tool in comparison to other CI/CD solutions, but it's very powerful. And if you are not using any of them and you are using something else, it's quite okay. The idea here is to show that each pipeline, it doesn't matter in Jenkins, TeamCity, each pipeline can be improved. You should put an eye on it. You should check how you can help the team to get faster feedback. Because ideally, let's say I'm a developer of new feature, I want to execute the pipeline and get the feedback immediately. That's my main idea. So the tools really doesn't matter.
But I feel that the GitLab, you have the both the features of GitHub and the GitHub Actions, right? Like when you say when we have the Git and Jenkins, we are using two separate tools to do to integrate the task. But is it that GitLab providing you everything? Because I see on the leftmost corner here in the menu, you have the merge request and you also have the continuous pipeline facility. So that is where it's a difference when you say GitHub and the GitLab. That is a difference you have.
If we compare GitHub and GitLab, they are mostly identical in the ideas they are using for pipelines. If we are comparing to Jenkins, it's a little bit different because Jenkins is just a pipeline. And inside GitLab, you have hosting for the repository, you have issues, so everything is integrated. The same story for GitHub. Everything is integrated. That's why it's more powerful. And if people already using something like GitHub or GitLab, they will not basically look for other tools because they have all the batteries included.
Thanks, Anton.
Thank you.
Thanks, and for great presentation. And maybe quick question regarding different features of GitLab that for bigger projects like with a lot of pipelines, and if we can customize dashboards, integrate with Jira, integrate with I don't know, channels like notification channels like Teams or maybe emails, and also along with webhooks to validate commits and maybe validate if the branch is allowed by schedule to commit, and different
I understand. All that stuff that you described is available for GitLab. You have webhooks, you have possibility to run pipelines by schedule. For example, here I didn't use it, but you see CI/CD schedule, so you can create schedule and, for example, run some nightly tests and so on. So speaking about features, GitLab has many features. I would say tons of features, but the problem is you have to play with all that features to understand how they look like and how they behave. I would say in my company, when I started to play with all these pipelines, developers mostly focused on building and deploying. They are not interested in everything between. And I see that QA can contribute to integrate some static code analysis, because GitLab also has possibility to attach this static code analysis with just one line. QA can help with speeding up the stuff and so on. You just need to try all that stuff, and GitLab has great documentation, but very often you will find yourself that they made something and then new release completely change it or create it new way. So just be sure that you are reading the latest documentation because a lot of stuff already has changed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So as you can see, our latest pipeline finished. I know that unit tests and end-to-end tests are failing, but we already have lack of time to dig into it, and my presentation is not about green pipelines here. I just got this code from GitLab, so it's totally fine. Again, the main idea, if we were trying to check that, for example, our first pipeline took 18 minutes, the latest took only 13. So we already have some boost after our optimization. And you can even go further. For example, if your job is using some tool that you each time install from the internet, it's better to create Docker image, put that tool inside this image, and just use that image available for this job. It will speed up also the process. So if no one has a question, I think we are good to finish our meetup. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate that you come at Saturday evening and you decided to spend time with me instead of football. So thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Anton, for organizing.